Welcome to our 17th podcast. Today, we will discuss stress within organizational change management, including defining stress, some signs of stress, and how to manage it. What elements of stress management can you use today in your change effort? Keep listening to find out. Welcome to Harmonious Workplaces, a podcast about corporate culture, organizational change management, and workplace behavior. Harmonious Workplaces was started by independent consultants Rich Cruz, Ben Kleinman, and Cheryl Volpe to explore, challenge, and build on various organizational culture and change management concepts. It's a blend of theory and practice based on their personal and professional experiences working with companies of all sizes across various industries. If you own a business, lead a team, want new ideas about the corporate environment, or just want to listen to a group of consultants talking about how to make work more enjoyable, we invite you to sit back, relax, and dive in with us to Harmonious Workplaces. Hello, Harmonious Workplaces listeners. As always, again, we're so glad to see you or hear you or know that you're here with us today. I'm Rich Cruz, and I'm joined by my colleagues, Cheryl Volpe. Hi, Cheryl.
Hey, Rich. Hi, everyone.
And Ben Kleinman.
Hi.
And for the last few episodes, we've been discussing leadership, specifically leadership through change management. And in our last episode, episode 16, if you haven't caught that, check out our podcast at your favorite podcast spot. And we were talking about leadership in times of calm and in times of crisis, right? So in times of crisis, we've got this fear of change among team members, and we have other pressures internally and externally from stakeholders. And not only can leaders feel stress, but workers, right? Everybody can feel stress. So have you experienced that? I'm sure you have, but have you seen that in your change efforts?
All the time. Yeah.
All the time, right?
All the time.
Yeah.
I think there's rarely been any kind of change that has not had some element of stress. And it's not necessarily bad stress. And I know you're going to give us some good definitions of that, Rich, and Cheryl, you'll expand on all of that. But sometimes it's a mix of both. And sometimes it's just the good old tire fire.
Yeah, for sure.
Good old fashioned.
I love the tire fire. We bring tire fire into this podcast more than any other podcast on the planet. I think that might be our trademark.
I think we've got a couple of things that have sort of flown through a few episodes. So it's good stuff. We usually reference tire fires, and longtime listeners will know we also talk about safe psychological beanbag and things like that. So it's
that's right.
It's good merchandise coming your way soon.
Absolutely. Watch out for the t-shirts. So, and Cheryl, you've in what you've done in operations in your career in entertainment and finance and everything else that you've done, you've probably seen your fair share of stress too, eh?
Production is sort of that like tire fire that you see coming towards you, and it's going to be hard. But after you've done one, we've never done two in a row that were the same. And there is a certain comfort with knowing that you've done it at least once before. But there are always unexpected things. There are always changes in the energy level, and what has to get done in a short period of time is extremely intense.
Yeah, sure.
And you see it coming. You're like, oh, here we go.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's that tornado that's in the distance, and it keeps coming closer and closer.
It feels great when you're done.
So,
when it's over, you're very proud. But you just
Rich, I think on maybe our first episode or at one point we were talking about similarities between theater and performing arts and change management and transformations. And I feel like there's something about, Cheryl, that time pressure when Friday night at 8:00, the curtain goes up, and no matter what you've already done, the show is going to start and audience will be there watching. And so you go with what you have. And somehow, magically, it almost always comes off. And from an audience perspective, if we translate that to the business world, from a client perspective, usually that seems very seamless, and it looks like the company, the organization has managed that change quite well. Internally, it could be just like you say, a rolling tire fire up until 7:59 on Friday evening. But it seems like that, at least in theater, and probably also in your productions for your world, it seemed like that. You just somehow magically get it done. And what's interesting to me is that I feel like on the corporate side of things, you kind of have that, okay, we're transitioning, we're turning on the new system, we're rolling out the new org structure, or whatever it might be. There's always carry through. There's always lingering. There's always like the tidy up bin or the fix it list for systems implementations that it's not going to get done, and you still roll things out. And yet you have this link. You never get to that sort of cast party moment is what I'm saying. You always have this drawn out, extended.
There are sometimes things you can't get to. It's true. It's true. Rich, before you go, I just wanted to address Ben's parallel in the corporate world. I will say that at Morgan Stanley, when we had an IPO that was also of enormous proportion, that was also that high stress. Martha Stewart's IPO, I'll never forget, people were falling asleep on the floor, never leaving work to get the details that had to be done for her specific expectations on everything that she had created for that event. And the last thing I'll say is all of those high stress periods are extremely bonding between the people who get through them too. And that's why you see people at the Academy Awards hanging on each other, tearful, because that intensity, it's almost like the war buddies in a way.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So go ahead.
Sure.
You see that camaraderie in the corporate world too.
Yes.
I think especially cross-functionally, people that would never have interacted naturally, they get thrown together for a project or a transformation or something like that. And then after it's rolled out, after it's done, months, years later, these people are still friendly with each other. They still communicate with each other. They still kind of keep tabs on each other. And it's just lovely to see those bridges.
Yes.
Yep. Absolutely.
I have taken us way sideways, Rich, away from your original topic. So
no, that's great.
I was right there with you.
maybe we do a pausey recappy kind of restart, reignite the tire fire.
Well, I think actually let's keep rolling with this a little bit. All right, so we've got we've got good stress and we've got bad stress, right? And when we talk about stress, we talk about usually it's distress, right? So it's the
bad stress.
Grappling, right? Exactly. That's the bad stress, right? So that's where we're not only in fight or flight mode, but we really feel like we are fighting this uphill battle, so to speak, right? And so we're in that proverbial war that we just talked about, right? But there's also, if we can take that energy and all of that we're feeling at that time and convert that into something that is more positive and creative, i.e., you're on the stage and you're performing, right? That can become eustress, right? That's the good stress. That's the pressure to perform and to do well. So that's the stuff when whenever I've performed music, I used to drum here and there and all of that. That's that time when you've got the butterflies going. You're like, oh God, I hope I remember this song, but then you're in it and you're co-creating with everybody and it just kind of moves you forward, Although I will say there was one time where I was doing I Will Survive with a group that I had never played with before, and I was filling in, and I took that tempo really fast. They were like, "What are you doing?"
And all survive.
Yeah,
That's
we
so
survived. Though. We got through it.
All right, future episodes right here. Morgan Stanley IPO situation. Rich on the drums for I Will Survive.
You Ben, all the,
Nobody wants to see that or me.
for you, Ben, all of the dead darlings that you had to put in that bin that just didn't make it into the projects to the end, that you had to just sort of put off to the side and keep in a drawer somewhere.
Yeah. All
Well,
right.
why don't we do
Cool.
this? Let's take a quick. We're going to take a quick break, folks. When we come back, we're going to talk about some of the signs of stress. So we'll be back in just a second. For Fortune 100 companies and small businesses alike, Harborside Strategy helps design and implement customized precision change management initiatives. From new organizational structures to new processes to new systems, we help you clarify the reason and urgency around your change in language that will resonate across your organization. With that clarity and a common purpose, we use the power of stories and blended communication methods to reinforce your goals and keep everyone focused and aligned. All of it tailored to your people, your organization, your needs. Contact Principal Ben Kleinman today to learn more at www.harborsidestrategy.com. Again, that is www.harborsidestrategy.com. And we're back. So we
Signs
were
of
just
stress.
talking about, yeah. So now we're going to talk about signs of stress, right? We kind of defined it. We talked about, how stress can, handle performance, good and bad. So let's kind of talk a little bit about what are those signs of stress? How do we identify that? What have you seen?
It becomes obvious when deadlines are missed, initiative is on the wane, quality declines, and, attitudes change, tones of emails change. There is non-compliance, teamwork fails, and there are so many things that can fall apart without the communication and the leadership and the shared goals, right? It's very easy in times of high stress for people to just freak out.
Sure.
Right.
I've seen a lot of I've seen a lot, Cheryl, and I'm glad you mentioned it, of where the people that you're working with suddenly have this shift in communication and they just start to get really short with each other, or they start to turn in work that is semi-baked. It's the cookies that are a little too underdone, or it's the spreadsheet that has 70% of the data filled in, but you're missing that critical 30%. It's those kinds of things. People oftentimes will go silent because they're sort of quiet, non-complying, and they sort of drag things out that way. And it's somewhat noticeable that you have this general tone of lack of communication. People start to fade out, if you will. And when they do engage, it's very curt and very abrupt. And you can sense that there's this sort of forced politeness, like I'm in a meeting and I'm going to try to behave well, but behind the scenes, there's that smoldering tire fire going on.
Right. And it's the test. It's the test of leaders at that point, right?
I was just going to say, yeah, that's where I feel like the leadership, the better leaders tend to lean in even more. They tend to not go heavy-handed, but they tend to recognize the situation and they tend to be more present. They tend to sort of be more supportive. They tend to be more helpful in terms of rallying people together, getting people to be a little bit more focused on what they need to be focused on, helping to emphasize the positives, things like that.
Right. And that would be connected to emotional intelligence. And there's a lot of debate around the whole EI topic. Mm-hmm. Some people are starting to say, maybe not starting, but EI and control of it suggests that you're self-regulating, and maybe that prevents you from being authentic, right? There's a whole spectrum of things related to EI, and leaders who have control or are well practiced in their awareness of their own emotional intelligence and emotional reactions can, I believe, lead that ship into calmer waters on the other side of a project versus that aggressive, blame-throwing, panic kind of leadership. So I do think it's connected to EI, and I don't think that it should be pushed off the table in favor of being more authentic or just out there and real all the time. Because in periods of high stress, you need to have some discipline and some training, right? Yeah.
For sure. Now, I will say I've had my fair share of working with a bunch of different organizations, and when there's a significant change. Actually, I don't even want to say significant. Sometimes it could be we're gonna change this time of this meeting this one day from here to there. That sends that it ignites that blaze right away. And so there's the quiet, polite, smoldering dissonance that happens, and then there are the outward, I really, really hate this, that happens, and we've got to deal with all of that. So what I've seen is that those folks often become like the late adopters, laggards that when we look at the kind of spectrum of change and the people within the population and how they change, the speed of which they adopt change, how do we help those people on the end here, those late adopters and those laggards? How do we help them overcome that stress that they feel so that we can bring them, closer to that other side?
So do we want to dig into that in our next moment? Dig into
let's do that. Let's take a quick break. We'll be coming right back to you, and we'll talk about some ways of managing our stress. Maybe we'll touch a little bit on that organizational stress. How do we help others through this? And then also talk a little bit about how we manage our own individual stress. So we'll be back in 1 second. Are you struggling with high employee turnover, low morale, or poor communication within your team? Do you find it challenging to foster collaboration and trust among your employees? Do you have resistance to some of the recent changes you've made in your business? You're not alone. According to sources such as Forbes and the Society for Human Resources Management, many business owners face these same challenges. They know that success comes from a strong workplace culture, but they don't always know where to start. If this sounds like you, it's time to take action. Our experienced consultants stand ready to work with you to develop customized solutions. Don't wait any longer. Take our quick culture scorecard today and discover where you can improve. Work Balance Consulting, where workplace culture meets success. Visit our website at www.workbalanceconsulting.com/scorecard and start your journey toward a better workplace today. Again, visit www.workbalanceconsulting.com/scorecard. And we're back. All right. So let's just recap. So we've talked about what stress is, good stress, bad stress. We talked about some of the outward signs and not so outward signs of stress. Let's talk a little bit now about how do we deal with that? How do we manage that? What are your thoughts?
I have been in different types of situations, and I remember even as a leader, there have been days where I have just wanted to say, I know you feel this way, and I'm sorry it's happening like this, but you have to finish. There are days where you just have to have that heart to heart and say, look, and we've talked about reward and motivation before in our podcast, and that 3-step reward model that I was talking about in terms of motivation a while ago. I think, what was it? Reward, instrumentality and balance, right? Those 3 steps.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That thing. So if there is some reward at that point that you can present that will reinvigorate someone's commitment or motivation, but you can't always do that either. And sometimes it's just a conversation. Sometimes it's just, I can tell that you are not totally here right now. Let's have a conversation. Let's talk about what's going on. Are you overwhelmed? Are you doing too many different jobs? Let's try and take some of that off your plate. Let's try to get you some resources, right? And those are the things that I have used in my actual experience.
That makes sense. That's very helpful. And that provides that kind of that space of psychological safety that when somebody is able to actually express their feelings. I was just actually listening to a podcast earlier today, believe it or not, this morning, that was about that, exactly that, giving people that space to express themselves, and knowing that somebody is there to listen. It goes a long way.
Right. And you can't always just throw more money at it. But again, going back to the production, if you go over budget, nobody wants to do that. There will be a different kind of repercussion for that. But there are times where something emerges and you are just going to have to drive off that cliff a little bit. And that will just be one of those things that shows up as a mark on every financial document forever after that. It impacts profit, impacts overall P&L, everything. But it happens sometimes.
Yeah.
No one's going to die. We just went over budget. It's terrible. But that happens.
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
Mm-hmm. Cheryl, you had a really nice observation earlier. Maybe wondering if you could dig into it a little bit more. Is this notion that leaders in times of stress, one of the first things they, as a leader, they need to do is just be aware of the situation. They just need to recognize that there is this heightened stress, there is a heightened sense of tension, that people on the team are behaving a little bit differently or a little bit more abrupt with each other, or work is not getting done, or like you said, there's some teammates that are struggling a little bit. And the first thing to do as a leader is just to recognize that, to be aware of it, and then try to get ahead of that and try to, like you were just saying, sit with that employee, try to understand what's going on, those kinds of things.
Right. In the 90s, a theory called AET, it was the effective events theory, and it was an outcropping of the whole emotional intelligence. Yes.
Sorry, can I just say 20 minutes in and Cheryl beat you to the acronym.
Bless you, Cheryl.
I gave you 20,
oh my gosh.
I gave you 20 minutes, Rich. I had to.
And I completely failed. I'm gonna sit with that stress all day now.
That's a mark that's gonna carry forward for all time. A little thing. Nobody died, right. But it's a mark that will be in our reporting. I'm so sorry, Cheryl. I cut you off. You were about to explain AET, please.
I thought you were about to just explain it for me at that moment. But
I
even better.
Even know.
Even better. So
I wouldn't even do it justice. So AET. So tell us.
AET is a theory that, again, came out of the 90s from a couple of guys that I want to get right, Weiss and Capranzano. And this was a study that they had done that, on one hand, it may seem very obvious. Yes, things that happen at work affect your behavior. But these guys put together this AET, which the basic tenet of it was, let's look at the nuances of what that really, really means. My kids are sick. I can't call out. My car broke down. I couldn't get a ride. I finally get to work. Nothing's working. People are out. That compounding is very real. And understanding how that can be identified and addressed is part of this theory. And what leaders who understand this theory comprehensively, there's two things they can do. And I don't know if it's too soon to reveal takeaways on this, but I'm going to
Oh,
Can I-
reveal.
I'm going to-
Before we do, can I just recap? Because I want to make sure that I understand. The AET stands for Affective Events
Theory.
Events.
And so it's not effective, it's affective with an A. And what that's getting at is this idea that all these external circumstances or internal turmoil, all of these things are affecting the situation and maybe different people's behavior and different people's actions and different people's internalization of stress and things like that. And so this whole theory is all about how do you recognize that there's all this external stuff or internal stuff, there's all this churn and turmoil and things that we can control, can't control, all of this, just recognize it. And then presumably the theory says, how do you handle it? Do I have that about right?
You have it exactly right. And you added something very, very important, is about the control. One of the major tenets of the theory is you need to identify as an employee and a leader, what is your scope of control? How much of that can you, it's like the serenity prayer, right? How much of that can you in fact control? And that is part of this theory. But the important part about it was that these things are real. These things do in fact affect a person's work output. And to ignore it is a mistake. And so the two things that leaders can do, the two takeaways from this entire discussion on the theory itself, in my opinion, for this episode, two things. Leaders have to be aware that these things are happening. They cannot just stay in the ivory tower with their closed door and pretending that everyone is just going to muscle through and everything will be fine. When there is a piling on of events that are causing stress, it has to be addressed. And the other thing is leaders can create a culture where discussions around these types of stress and the effects they have on people in their work can be talked about. If there is not a culture of discussion or an open forum baked into the culture already, then that, again, erodes the psychological safety. I'm just going to keep it to myself and I'm going to look for a new job. You're going to lose me because I can't talk.
Demotivating people. So it's that awareness, and it's, as a leader in particular, it's self-awareness, but also situational awareness. And then it's enabling or maybe even creating or emphasizing that culture of safety, that culture of communication and culture of psychological safety to make that situation overall be a little bit less stressful.
Right.
Sure.
You got it.
Cool. If I could address two things on that. The first one on awareness, right? We often hear about mindfulness, and we hear more about that in the literature in the last decade, maybe. I think that was probably when I first started to hear about that. This mindfulness of this is happening, and it's not even like we are going to change this right now, right? Like we're going to address this. It's literally like the awareness of this is what is, and being able to internally process this and helping other people to process what is, right? And that's a pretty important thing that as opposed to what had happened in the past was, you might have some acknowledgement of that, but you might also get, tough. There's almost this immediate reaction of defensiveness that would happen with that, right? Whereas the research seems to support that acknowledgement and without the resistance, right? Without that wall of okay, whatever, but let's just get back to work, which is not safe, right? That's I think that's kind of a big change in my opinion. That's really happened a lot lately. Does that ring true to you?
Yeah. I go ahead, sure.
I just wanted to say that you also bring up another point that is part of the AET, and it is that when a leader has their own level of stress, and it might be in these conversations where it's this open forum in a meeting with an employee that's having stress, the leaders also have a perspective. They're dealing with a whole set of stresses and issues that not everyone else, it's not above their pay grade, right, to deal with the most stressful aspects. And if they can share some of that in these conversations with the employees, and maybe in those one-on-ones where, look, I know you're stressed, but let me explain as your leader a little bit more about why we're having to go this route, right? To the extent the leader can share some of that higher strategic thinking. So that can also help those other employees. But something you were talking about made me think about the leader's perspective. So thank you.
Yeah, the kind of contextual awareness sometimes helps. Sometimes that sort of taking people out of that level of grass and shrubs and bringing them up to the top of the tree canopy, or even that 15,000 foot level, can help people realize, okay, whatever I'm dealing with, it's in service of something much bigger. So let's figure out how we can get through that. The other thing, Rich, to answer your question, I think there has been this general shift over time, I think, where you have emotional intelligence becoming kind of a thing. And now you have mindfulness as maybe another way to express that. And the two of them become very powerful and I think are becoming more rooted both in our culture, at least here in the U.S., and also in the business culture, again, here in the U.S.
Sure. Well, another thing that I think has been coming more and more into our culture, our collective culture, and I've certainly seen it a lot used in coaching, because I've gone through some individual coaching myself. Is kind of breath work, where not only do we do it ourselves, but we can help others through that too. But just some of these simple like box breathing exercises, because we're maintaining control of ourselves. So we don't have control over everything, but we can actually have some level of control of ourselves. So this kind of I know one that I personally have used is this 4-7-8 breathing box technique, where it's
different ones.
Breathe in for 4, hold it for 7, out for 8. You do this a few times, and it's just it washes the distress away. Yeah,
I was reading somewhere that the military trains their soldiers. Again, just here in the U.S., that they use that as a tool to help soldiers stay calm, stay focused in times of incredible stress. I mean,
right? Sure.
It's permeating many avenues of our culture.
The first time I learned about it was on the subways in New York City, and there was a point in time where I had a chronic back issue, and a friend of mine told me about it, and I did the 4-4-4-4. Breathe in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, and then wait for 4 before you take the next one. And that was immediate and miraculous. It took all of I'd be standing there and I would think, oh, I got to do that breathing thing. And it's immediate and amazing how simple it is, and completely in your control. It was very helpful.
Yep. Yeah.
I love
if anybody ever has. What's that?
I love that it's coming into the workplace. It's such a simple thing. And it's right on the heels of the EI and the mindfulness.
Well, and actually in the workplace, right? Some things that I've read recently and that I've actually just recently experienced through our own healthcare provider is that the insurance providers are offering apps and mindfulness and breathing for the employees, so that they literally have instant access if they need to break away and they need to have somebody coach them through this. There are these videos and these audio cues that they can use to get back to a level where they can go back and perform.
Such a great point. Yeah. That's happening. I have one on my phone, but I ignore it every time it says it's time for you to do your stretch.
It's too stressful to open the app.
It's very patient, though. It never yells at me the next day. It just says, we're ready again. That's right.
Well, yeah, there you go. You can't hurt the feelings of the robot in our pocket. So,
Not
right on.
yet. Maybe that will change with ChatGPT.
Not yet.
Yeah, maybe.
Sentient robots. We should save that for another day, though.
Yes.
Yeah, let's do that. And with that, let's just quickly do a recap of today's episode. So, we were talking about coming off of discussions of leadership through calm and crises. Right, we are now talking about stress. What is it? So we've got good stress, bad stress. We've got the second part of what we talked about, some of those signs of stress. So, Ben, you got to
recognizing
recap
stress
some
in
of that
people,
stuff.
yeah. Just how people behave differently, how people are expressing themselves differently. They come to work differently. They deliver work differently, and just it's you can sense that change in the air.
And then in our last segment here today, we talked about some tools and techniques and ways to manage stress. Cheryl introduced. Actually, you introduced two acronyms, just to be fair. EI, right? Emotional intelligence, and then
It's Crew's acronym counter.
AET. Yeah, and I haven't included even one today. So Cheryl wins.
Yay!
Hooray!
Cool. And I think where we might want to leave it is our top two takeaways as far as things that leaders should be thinking about, leaders should be aware of, leaders should be doing. That first one, especially in times of stress, leaders must be aware of the situation. They have to step outside of their own bubble, their internal bubble, whatever their team bubble is, and be aware of what's going on and how their team is performing. And especially in times of stress, they need to create or enable or promote that culture of safety and make sure that communication is thriving, make sure that psychological safety is thriving, and really promote those better angels in all of us.
Right. Exactly.
Well said.
Cool.
Let people express what they're feeling without feeling like there's going to be some horrible negative repercussion. Right.
And don't drum too fast on "I Will Survive."
That's true.
Yeah. Please.
You will cause
both.
a lot of stress in the audience and your bandmates for sure. So
Thank you both. Good one today.
Thank you. Yeah,
Thank you,
great one. All right. Well, thanks, listeners. Thank you for tuning in to us today. You've been listening to the Harmonious Workplaces podcast. You can find us on YouTube and your favorite streaming platforms. It's all streaming from Podbean. We are at harmoniousworkplaces.com. And with that, we will see you in our next episode. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Rich. Bye, Ben.
Well, with that, until we meet again, make change your friend for more harmonious workplaces. Thank you very much.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Harmonious Workplaces. You can find Harmonious Workplaces on LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, Spotify, Amazon, Apple, and other streaming platforms. We'd love any feedback on whatever channel you find us on. Please rate, like, and share our podcast with your network, and remember to add Harmonious Workplaces to your list of favorites to get notified about each new episode. To contact Rich or Cheryl, please visit www.workbalanceconsulting.com. To connect with Ben, find him on LinkedIn or visit at www.harborsidestrategy.com.